Good evening, I'm Cynthia Ng. You are tuning in to AWANI tonight. UMNO has nominated its Melaka State Liaison Chief Datuk Sri Abdul Rauf Yusof as the state's new Chief Minister. Party President Datuk Sri Ahmad Zaid Hamidi says that he has submitted Rauf's name to Melaka Governor Tun Muhammad Ali Rustam. According to Zahid, Datuk Sri Sulaiman Mat Ali had tendered his resignation as Chief Minister due to health reasons. Asked if the new lineup of Melaka Executive Councillors would include Pakatan Harapan Assemblymen, Zahid said the appointments would reflect the structure at the federal level.
Kita mengambil semangat kerajaan perpaduan yang telah berjalan dengan baik di peringkat nasional. Saya yakin semangat itu akan dihilirkan ke Melaka supaya optik yang baik dapat diperlihatkan kepada bukan saja rakyat Melaka tetapi untuk rakyat Malaysia keseluruhannya.
Rauf was previously the State Executive Councillor for Industry, Investment and Entrepreneurial Development from November 2021. He was also the Melaka State Assembly Speaker from May 2020 to November 2021. The swearing-in ceremony for the Melaka Chief Minister is expected to be held on Friday. With Melaka slated to receive a new Chief Minister tomorrow, we examine the impact to both the federal government as well as the incoming state government. Professor James Chin from the University of Tasmania discusses the dynamics among the political parties within the administration in Putrajaya.
Even though Barisan Nasional under UMNO has won a big majority in Melaka, after the formation of the unity government in November, it was widely understood that the states controlled by the Barisan Nasional, Pakatan Harapan, has been edging UMNO to allow them to have some executive position. So what we're seeing in Melaka now is basically a realignment of the political chairs. So with the new Chief Minister of Melaka, I expect Pakatan to get at least one executive or one exco position in the Melaka state government. This change in Melaka can also be seen as Pakatan Harapan together with UMNO preparing for these upcoming 6 elections. So they want their internal party dynamics to be as stable as possible. They want their people to work together. UMNO under Zahid has made it very clear he does not see a future with Perikatan Nasional. So he's putting all his eggs into the basket with Pakatan Harapan under Anwar Ibrahim. So we not only saw this in Melaka, people forget that in Sabah recently, under the GRS government, Pakatan Harapan also entered the state government for the very first time in January this year. So we can expect this process to carry forward.
James also outlines what is in store for Sulaiman's successor, who will be sworn in tomorrow.
I think with the new Chief Minister, I think it's widely known that his name has been nominated. Zahid has gone public with his name. So we expect a very smooth transition. So in terms of the Melaka Chief Minister, his first priority is basically 2 things. He's got to decide which EXCO position will be given to Pakatan Harapan and who from Pakatan Harapan he will nominate into government. So there's choices to be made. Secondly, I think he has to spend a bit of time trying to heal Melaka UMNO party itself. The party obviously was divided. The fact that Zahid was forced to intervene and push out an incumbent chief minister suggests that there are some issues in Melaka UMNO.
The government has launched a 3-year strategy to review the country's tax system. Deputy Finance Minister Datuk Sri Ahmad Mazlan said Malaysia's current taxation model was not sustainable in controlling the country's high debt levels.
Model ini memang tidak sustainable, memang tidak mampan. Kita akhirnya pada satu ketika nanti tidak akan boleh meneruskan model 11.5% hasil cukai daripada KDNK ini.
Ahmad said among the measures taken by Putrajaya to address the issue was the introduction of targeted electricity subsidies this year, which saved the government about 4 billion ringgit. A targeted diesel subsidy is also in the works, with the mechanism to be finalised in June.
Yang lain ialah kita ingin meluaskan asas hasil cukai, menambah baik menyemak Mula struktur dan perundangan cukai dan memberi insentif-insentif percukaian. Ya.
The government also plans to introduce the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which will include several initiatives such as limiting the country's debt to 65% of GDP and debt service charges to 1.5% of the federal government's annual budget.
A group of government doctors is planning a nationwide strike from April 3rd to 5th. The Mogok Doctor Malaysia group says that more than 8,000 contract doctors will take medical or emergency leave as a sign of protest, warning against people visiting health facilities on those dates as there could be longer waiting hours. Organizers of the strike, however, discouraged doctors to participate in demonstrations or flash mobs. They also warned of potential mass resignations on April 1st. Among their demands include better wages, higher on-call rates, and a resolution to understaffing issues. It is also calling for the absorption of all contract medical officers into permanent positions without any conditions or interviews, as well as their working hours to be capped at 60 hours a week. On Wednesday, Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Noor Hisham Abdullah urged the group to not go on strike, saying it was not the best solution and that it could come at the expense of human lives. Competition should not lead to division in the world of technology, as this would only increase costs and hinder progress. Speaking at the BOA Forum in Hainan, China, Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim recognizes that while every country must protect its intellectual property rights, some guardrails must be in place to ensure that competition does not create a division.
On the one hand, we need to recognize that countries will always seek to protect their intellectual property rights and try to stay ahead on the competition. On the other hand, we need to establish certain guardrails so that the competition does not lead to bifurcation in the technological world, one that will raise costs and impede progress. That's why I believe that technological competition should be one of the principal agenda items for discussion at the highest levels, right up there with discourses on security and general economic matters.
Separately, Anwar also pitched for China to reinvigorate its Belt and Road Initiative by urging collaboration among countries. The Prime Minister says it is time for the infrastructure collaboration to regain its momentum with the worst of the pandemic over. Anwar is on a 4-day official visit to China, the first by Malaysian leader since former Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad's trip in April 2019. Earlier, Anwar also held a bilateral meeting with Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong at the Boao Golden Coast Hotel.
We'll go for a quick break. Stay tuned for more. Welcome back. The AP Secretary General Anthony Loke said that political appointments in government-linked companies or GLCs listed on Bursa Malaysia is not the same as those appointed to statutory and regulatory bodies. Now, this comes amid criticism of ongoing political appointees in GLCs. Hafizi Razali from Bauer Group Asia discusses the relevancy of such practices.
I think it doesn't really matter whether someone is appointed to a GLC, public listed GLC or not, because by the end of it, we'll have to understand that a lot of these companies are owned by the government, or the government has majority stakes or significant stakes in these companies. And the key of reform is to make sure that there's no political interference, particularly when it comes to making business decisions, especially when a lot of these companies that we are talking about have large presence, employ a lot of people, utilize a lot of capital. So with regards to political interference, we want to have minimal or non-political interference at all. And this involves whether public listed or non-listed GLCs.
For the government to gain the trust of the people, it must prioritize implementing laws to avoid future political appointments in GLCs, which must be expanded to include government-owned regulatory bodies.
Yeah, number one, the government will have to come up with a principled stance on what does it mean by a political appointment. And the term GLC here has to be explained properly as well, because different people have different understandings on what it means. But it should also be expanded to not just GLCs, public listed or not, but to also regulatory bodies or any bodies that do business owned by the government, because essentially it affects the livelihood of people. And if you make wrong strategic decisions, then it can potentially impact the livelihood of people on the ground, right? And the second point of it is that there has to be a parliamentary committee that looks into this and formalize it, institutionalize it as part of an act of parliament or parliamentary consensus, and perhaps take a cabinet action on this as well, cabinet decision, to make sure that the principles are agreed upon, and after that, the government can come up with guideline documents that are protected by the ambit of law, so that when there's any change of government, you have to go back to the law, and the law says that principally we don't accept political appointments in any of these scopes.
Up to 31 people have died after a ferry carrying about 250 passengers and crew caught fire in the southern Philippines. Search and rescue efforts were continuing for at least 7 missing passengers. The MV Lady Mary Joy III was traveling from the southern port city of Zamboanga to the Sulu province when it caught fire just before midnight local time. At least 23 passengers were injured and taken to the hospital. It was discovered that some additional passengers were not listed on the ship's documents. Accidents at sea are common in the Philippines due to frequent storms and poorly maintained boats. Overcrowding and weak health and safety regulations, especially in the remote areas, also play a part. Last year, 7 people died after a high-speed ferry carrying 134 people caught fire. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has returned to Brasilia from his self-imposed exile in the U.S. The far-right politician is back in Brazil for the first time since his supporters stormed the Supreme Court, Congress, and Presidential Palace in January.
Prior to boarding his flight from Florida, Bolsonaro had said he would not lead the opposition party under President Lula da Silva's government. However, he will offer his expertise to the Liberal Party and travel across Brazil to campaign in next year's local elections. The former leader faces numerous challenges on his return, including a probe into whether he incited rioters to storm government buildings a week after Lula's inauguration in January. Following riots caused by his supporters, police have taken precautions for his return by cordoning off the main esplanade in the capital. He is expected to make his way to the headquarters of the Liberal Party, where he will meet his wife and party leaders.
In the United States, hundreds of people gathered at a candlelight vigil in Nashville to honor those that were killed in the mass shooting at a private Christian school last Monday. 3 9-year-olds and another 3 adults were killed in the attack.
First Lady Jill Biden and singer Sheryl Crow were among those attending, as were civic leaders, including the mayor and police chief.
Our heart is broken, our city united, as we mourn together. When words just can't carry the weight of what is in our hearts, we must reach out to each other to help each other carry the load, to think of all the hugs that they would have had and all the hugs we can still give each other.
The perpetrator of Monday's carnage was a former Covenant School student, 28-year-old Audrey Elizabeth Hale. The deadly rampage lasted about 14 minutes before Hale was shot and killed by police. Authorities have not yet determined the shooter's motive, but say the assailant did not target specific victims.
That wraps up AWANI Tonight. I'm Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching and good night.